The Appalachian Trail is an incredibly popular 2,200-mile long public hiking trail in the eastern United States that traverses scenic, wooded, pastoral, wild, and culturally resonant lands. Since 1921, it claims to be one of the longest hiking trails in the world, and more than 3 million people hike the segment of the trail each year. The Appalachian Trail has always been deemed as generally safe, with most dangers related to weather conditions, human error, plants, animals, and diseases. One other danger of the Appalachian Trail Conservancy list is hostile humans. Since its completion in 1937, there have been 13 known murders on the trail, with the first murder reported in 1974. Today we're going to talk about the case number 5, the murders of Geoffrey Hood and Molly LaRue in 1990. Before we get into today's story, World's End posts regularly to tell you some incredible and tragic tales of travelling around the world. If you want to see more, please like and subscribe so you don't miss out. Our story begins in 1990, where we meet our young lovers Geoffrey Hood and Molly LaRue. They had met in Saline, Kansas, where they both worked for a church-sponsored outfit that took in at-risk youngsters and taught them wilderness skills and seemed to help their troubles with adventure. Jeff was 26 at the time and was a friendly, thoughtful Tennessean with a patient, even temper. Molly was a year younger and was a sunny, energetic artist who in high school had won a national contest to design a 1984 postage stamp. They both loved working together with young people and working in the outdoors. Jeff was a keen rock climber who taught people at New Mexico's Philmount Scout Ranch in his spare time. Molly completed 2 outward bound courses and spent a year providing wilderness therapy to kids in the Arizona desert. Unfortunately, the youngsters learned that they would both be laid off in May. They were at a crossroads in their life and didn't really know what to do. They finally came up with a plan. They would go on a 6-month hike which would take them on the adventure of a lifetime. That day, Molly's father recalls a phone call where she said, "You know, I've always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail and I have a friend here who wants to do it too. Do you want to know something about the friend?" I said, "Yes, I would." She said, "Well, he's a male." I said, "Are you announcing a relationship?" And she said, "Yes, I am." By then, she and Jeff were completely infatuated with each other. "I love you forever, I like you for always," he wrote in April, when he was off in the backcountry. "As long as I'm living, my all you will be." She cashed in her savings to finance the trip, which they'd start in Maine, which is very rare as only 1 in 10 hikers started from this location. And so, on June 4th, 1990, having climbed the day before to the peak of the mile-high Mount Katahdin, they set off on their long walk. They found it a lot harder than they thought it would be. Molly said, "We reminded one another before starting on this ordeal that there would be tough days that we would ask ourselves, why are we doing this?" Jeff added, "Our bodies had almost had as much as they can take." In most shelters across the Appalachian Trail, they have logbooks where hikers can leave their comments, notes, and stories. Remember, these were times before mobile phones, so this was the only way for hikers to connect with each other. From the notes left in these logbooks by Jeff and Molly, they were having the adventure of a lifetime. On this trail, they had surveyors who'd worked tirelessly for years to reroute the footpath so it goes through a beautiful stretch of forest. Karen Lutz was one of these hard-working surveyors. On September the 11th, 1990, she was working on a section of this new trail where she saw a bearded man plodding up the road behind her. She was close to a turnpike and presumed that he was a hitchhiker between rides. There was no way this guy was a hiker. He wore a flannel shirt, jeans and combat boots and had a small backpack on his back and carried 2 bright red gym bags, each emblazoned with the Marlboro logo. He kept his head down as he trudged past and headed toward US 11. 2 hours later, Karen was further north of the trail, well north of the US 11. She saw the strange man again and realised, so he was hiking. He was heading towards the Darlington shelter. There was something about the man, his filthiness, his clothes, his joyless progress, and it filled her with dread. She didn't know that the stranger carried a long-barreled .22 caliber revolver, a box of 50 bullets, and a double-edged knife nearly 9 inches long. She didn't know that he was among Florida's most wanted fugitives. Even so, Karen herself, a 1978 through hiker, decided that Darlington was a place that she sincerely did not want to be. For years, she was haunted by that moment. She said she was troubled by the tremendous skill of the fact that I'd seen him and that I'd sensed an evil aura coming off him. I know it sounds wacko, but that's exactly what I felt, and I didn't do anything. Jeff and Molly were now halfway through the trip and feeling much more comfortable now compared to the beginning of the hike. They were at a tiny camp called Peter's Mountain Shelter, north of the Susquehanna River, where they bumped into a 15-year-old runaway. Being the nice, helpful couple that they were, they used the experience to help the young boy, giving suggestions and ideas for him to try. On their way towards Duncannon, they stopped off at a town to resupply and have a bit of fun with new friends they found along the trail. They stopped at a pizza parlour before finishing their night at the Doyle Hotel, which was a very run-down inn. Even though the place was incredibly dated and tired, they served cheap beer and burgers and it was just what they needed. They unpacked in their damp, spider-infested rooms and rang their parents. Jeff said, "We have something to tell you when we all get together." Jeff's younger sister said, "There's always been a lot of speculation about what that was going to be. She thinks they planned to announce their engagement." The next day, they picked up their mail and supplies and followed the trail deep into the woods and up to Cove Mountain. They climbed the treacherous trek to Hawk Rock, but luckily it was an easy hike from there to the camp at Thelma Marks. Jeff and Molly likely arrived there sometime after 5 p.m. The graffiti-carved plank floors slept 4 or 5 comfortably, 8 at a pinch. They would have had plenty of room to unroll their sleeping gear and spread out a bit. Sunset came at 7:22 p.m, but the shelter was hunched against the mountain's eastern flank in the shade of the ridgetop. That night, Jeff and Molly were brutally murdered whilst they slept in their sleeping bags. Jeff was shot 3 times with a .22 caliber pistol to the head, back and abdomen. Molly was tied up with a rope, looped to her neck before she was raped. She was then stabbed to death by slashing her neck, throat and back 8 times with a 9-inch double-edged blade. Later that day, on September the 13th, they were found by Cindy and Brian Bowen, who were 2 Appalachian Trail hikers who were looking for shelter that evening. Molly was found face down in a pool of blood with her hands tied behind her back. Jeff was found partially naked with a white shirt in his hand. The Bowens, terrified, headed back to Duncannon to report the crime to the authorities. That night, detectives who'd never set foot on the trail struggled for 3 hours to reach Thelma Marks. They said, "I think most of the conversation was curse words," recalls Pennsylvania State Trooper Bill Link. He said, "We were in dress shoes and it was dark." The crime scene unfolded piece by piece in the beams of their flashlights. Jeff was lying in the back corner, his head on a makeshift pillow. At first glance, Link wrote in his report, one would be led to believe that the subject was just asleep. At the other side of the lean-to, he wrote, the body of a female was observed laying face down in a pool of blood. It took another 4 hours to manoeuvre a pair of all-terrain vehicles up the mountainside on an old logging road, troopers chopping down trees to clear the way so that the bodies and evidence could be removed. Days after, a man had been seen in the area near the site of the murders that had been seen carrying 2 red Marlboro gym bags. This was the same man that Karen had seen while surveying, but this time he was seen wearing Jeff's backpack and boots. He was spotted by a hiker who embarked on a freelance search for the killer, and when he recognised Jeff's backpack on his back, he sounded the alarm. The man was quickly arrested and named as Paul David Cruz. In the intervening months, as Cruz awaited trial for the Perry County Prison in New Bloomfield, it had become clear that things were about to get a lot worse. They discovered that Cruz was also responsible for the 1986 slaying of a woman called Clemmy Jewel Arnold, a 56-year-old lady from Bartow, Florida. FBI records stated that she was found naked near Cruz's makeshift home next to an alligator-infested swamp. Her throat was slashed 6 times and she was nearly decapitated. Cruz's bloody clothes and knife were found in the trunk of Clemmy's car. So who was Paul Cruz? Whilst I prefer not to focus on the killer and I prefer to tell the story of the victims, Cruz's history can help paint a picture of how someone can become such a monster later in life. Cruz was a severely depressed drug user who was prone to threatening behaviour according to federal officers, relatives, teachers, classmates and coaches. He had mental problems and he had signs of being manic depressive, said Susan Cruz, a registered nurse who adopted Cruz on April 6, 1961. During his childhood, he was forced to leave his natural family, which made him incredibly angry, especially towards his father who abandoned him and his 7 brothers and sisters when he was 9. He ran away from his adoptive parents multiple times and got into trouble with the authorities for carrying a knife when he was 12. In 1972, Cruz quit school after his senior year football and wrestling sessions, his mother said. She said Cruz disappeared but returned to finish school during summer session. That same year, he joined the Marines. Unfortunately, neither the service or marriage to his high school sweetheart, Teresa Ann Dunman, could fix Cruz's life. He was severely depressed and he was on strong antidepressants and eventually tried to commit suicide before being committed to a military hospital. 7 months later, Cruz was discharged from the military because of severe mental depression. Dunman said that she divorced Cruz in 1974 and she never saw him again. He bounced between residences and jobs in later life and spiraled into alcoholism and drug abuse. He had high tempers because of cocaine and marijuana. He would mix it with beer and whiskey liquor, said Vanessa Simmons, Cruz's brother's girlfriend, who is partially paralysed because he shot her in the head with a sawed-off shotgun during an argument. He then married his second wife, who he then proceeded to brutally murder. At the trial that started on May 15, 1991, he blamed cocaine and alcohol for his behaviour, but the prosecutor gave evidence that showed that the gun found on Cruz testified to match the bullets removed from Geoffrey's body. He was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and he was given 2 death sentences. In 2006, Cruz agreed to drop his appeals in exchange for 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Perry County District Attorney Charles Chenot said that the victims' relatives approved the deal. Cruz's DNA was linked to semen found on Molly's body, and this, together with the weapons and other evidence found near the shelter, meant the authorities had a strong case against him, which finally resulted in his conviction. So that's an incredibly sad story of the murders of Geoffrey Hawes and Molly LaRue. This is such an incredibly sad story about 2 young lovers who went for the adventure of a lifetime and unfortunately ended in tragedy. I was only going to do 1 video on the Appalachian Trail murders, but from the very first case I decided that the stories needed telling in their entirety. This is why I've decided to make a series on this. Please feel free to subscribe. I'll put all of these videos in a playlist for you to watch in series and binge to your heart's content. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, it helps more than you think. And lastly, thank you for watching.